The second episode of the Scrubs revival is doing something that most second episodes do not bother with. You see, it's not trying to impress you, it's trying to build something. Episode 1 had to carry the weight of a reunion episode. 15 years of expectations, a status quo to reestablish, and the question of whether this was going to be a nostalgia tour or an actual show. It had to answer all of those questions while also being funny. Episode 2 doesn't have that problem anymore. You see, the band is back together. Now it has to figure out what they're going to play. You see, it gets the character work almost exactly right. The comedy lands. The emotional beats are genuinely earned. But there are two or three moments where you can see the scaffolding of a show that has to repeat stories from the previous series, where the writers needed a conflict and built one out of the thinnest possible wall that they had to create one. That contrast is a useful lens for everything that will follow, because the shortcuts aren't lazy, they just kind of feel a little rushed. And that's a different problem, one that traces directly back to something we talked about last week. You see, they only get 9 episodes. The episode starts with JD assuming the position of chief of medicine. He knows that he does not have the authority that Dr. Cox had. His first instinct going into rounds is to be firm.
My very first rounds with my interns, I needed to establish my teaching style. Be firm.
That's not gonna cut it, buddy boy.
But I correctly diagnosed her and she's being discharged.
Oh, sorry. To be honest, I was thinking about my teaching style. Great job, buddy boy. Next patient.
You've never been good at being mean. Try super friendly with fun nicknames.
Then he gets to the first intern and she answers the question correctly. Now, JD, wanting to mimic Dr. Cox, calls her
Okay, I'm gonna call you
Hot mouth? You called an intern hot mouth?
Dr. Tosh was answering every question right. She was on fire.
That
Dr.
HR rep is Sibby Wilson. And I want to be honest about her character for a second because the show needs something in her place, but it's not her. You see, she stepped in because the old teaching methods weren't just abrasive. Some of them were genuinely harmful. And the cultural shift that made them unacceptable is a real story worth telling. But Sibby isn't going to be the one to tell it. If anything, her character seems to be performing it. Every line delivery is a corporate mandated smile that exists to make her comfortable and not actually help anyone. The best way I could describe it is that she reminds me of human resources officers who tell you that we work in a family environment and all of us are a family. But she's not engaging with JD the way you would expect. If anything, she's more processing him. There is no conviction underneath the smile. Any warmth that she has feels more like a function of her role. When you have an antagonistic character on a show, one of the most important things you can do is have that character believe in what they're doing. Even when it's malicious, it feels honest to the viewer. And Sibby feels like a customer service chatbot who is wearing the costume of a person. And at least when I watch it, it makes me root for the old ways by default, even in the moments where I know that those methods are incorrect. That's a problem that the show is going to have to solve as it moves forward. If anything, you could have used this as a diagnostic for where this attitude was coming from. You see, the person who had this job before JD built his authority over 15 years of consistent targeted psychological pressure. He knew exactly which nerve to press and on which intern to press it on. JD is trying to reverse engineer that effectiveness through warmth. And warmth doesn't work when none of the interns know you yet. What JD actually is, and what the episode slowly pieces together, is a mentor for these new residents. He's not a chief, and if anything, he excels at one-on-one communication, where he can read the room and respond to a specific person. But if you put him in front of 6 interns and a patient chart and ask him to be authoritative on command, you end up with hot mouth. But speaking of Dr. Cox and his methodology, there is a throwaway moment in this episode that accidentally exposes one of its bigger contradictions.
None of you allowed to touch my surgical robot. That is my robot. Whose robot is it?
Your robot.
Exactly. When it arrives, if you plan on using it, you will have to finish every single training module.
Oh, Dr. Turk.
Yes.
I'm in the middle of an 18-hour shift. When am I supposed to learn all this without losing my mind?
That is a great question, Deshauna. What is that, not everyone?
Your problem.
Exactly. Matter of fact, don't even look at this no more.
And the scene moves on. But here's why it matters. You see, in episode 1, the entire premise is that the new wellness restrictions have made it impossible for Dr. Cox to teach interns the way they used to be taught. He can't turn them down, he can't run them ragged, and that the culture has changed. But
I am not sure how to teach these kids. I can't work them crazy hours or even abuse them anymore.
And that's a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't sure if you'd get that. I am now supposed to watch every word that comes out of my mouth because apparently they are all fragile little Christmas ornaments. Case in point, tick-tock-tock.
But if Darshana is on 18-hour shifts, then his stated complaint and his reason for leaving really don't add up in the second episode. Maybe this is just a hospital thing that I don't understand. Maybe surgical and medical have different hourly requirements. Though I would think if you were cutting somebody open, you would be allowed to work less than if you were just diagnosing issues. Now, the show stumbles into something genuinely complicated about how wellness works. Now, there's a scene later in the episode that isn't trying to be the funniest thing in the room, and I think it lands harder because of it. You see, Elliot vented to the charge nurses about her marriage. The hospital gossip did what it did, and it evolved and took on a life of its own. By the time that JD introduces himself to the charge nurses as the new chief of medicine, they already know him as the man who cheated on that beautiful queen. The charge nurses not being able to keep that to themselves is completely par for the course, because that's how charge nurses work in real hospitals. Information moves, it mutates, and nobody asks permission. And a little bit of a side note: in the first series, I think Elliot was was specializing in endocrinology toward the end of the series. Having her move to the simulation labs to help people learn CPR and incubation seems like it would be a huge step down. But whatever. There might be a bit more of a story there later. But you see, I love what Turk did in response. You see, he didn't correct the record.
Hey.
Have you heard these rumors about me having a mistress?
Yep. But you can't stop hospital gossip, so I hooked you up. I made her a really sexy Brazilian woman named Valentina. You want to hear about some of the stuff y'all got into?
No. But I bet Valentina has caramel skin.
Oh, you know she does. Valentina.
Now, this isn't really a joke, but it does remind me what happens when an ex reaches out to a good friend wanting to know what you've done, what you've been up to, how you're doing. If you're a good friend, you don't just give the truth. You kind of put a little bit of a spin on it and you make the story a better story. I wouldn't say that Turk was protecting JD through loyalty exactly, but he did. It almost felt like something that was instinctual from the character. And I guess what I love about it is that JD was fully invested in this fake story. He wants to know exactly what Turk invented for the character, and he asks him to narrate the whole thing in real time. If I had to kind of like summarize it, I would say that kind of like recounts their entire friendship from the very first episode. But here is where the scaffolding shows. The episode's main institutional conflict is a fight over the budget between Elliot's simulation lab and Turk's surgical robot. The board has frozen funding and told JD that there's only room to purchase one. He looks at the numbers in the budget, and the robot generates more revenue. The simulation lab costs the hospital money. Obviously, he picks the robot, and the episode spins it as a real conflict. But I guess when you think about it, the dilemma is manufactured. And I only know this because I went down the rabbit hole. You see, I watched the budget fight play out and something felt off. So I started looking things up. The surgical robot, a Da Vinci system, which which is what Sacred Heart would have realistically been acquiring, runs between $2 and $3 million. Elliot's mannequins, the old ones that they already had, the kind where the jaw fell off, those run somewhere between 5 and 35 grand each, with the most state of the art versions running as high as 80,000. She realistically only needs one for the program, and that feels like a rounding error on the robot's annual maintenance. Why the hospital administrator looked at the spreadsheet and said no, I'm not exactly sure, because in the hospital setting, you're going to have to certify and recertify people on these procedures like what, every year, every 2 years? I don't know what the renewal process is, but it's a value add, especially when you like factor in that most hospitals run community awareness programs where they take money in order to teach you CPR and basic life-saving maneuvers. But the show wanted to manufacture a zero-sum conflict to force JD into a decision that cost him something. Now, that's a legitimate narrative goal, but as soon as you think about it a little bit longer, you can kind of feel like something's off. Now, all this leads up to trying to show that JD has to discover that being chief of medicine occasionally means being the villain. And that was a real insight because Dr. Cox had to learn the same thing back in the original series when he took over from Kelso. Uh, there was the entire episode where he was sitting in the cafeteria all day long trying to figure out the budget, only to find out that the day was over as soon as he was able to put his lab coat back on. Dr. Cox wore that like a cross, and he did manage to pull it off, but I don't know that JD is going to be able to wear the same suit for the entire season. It feels like something that would eventually get the better of him. And I do like that this wasn't something that was kind of pointed out by Dr. Cox in the first episode. It feels like something that you don't really learn until you sit down in the chair and take on the role of the chief of medicine. Dr. Kelso probably had to go through it. Cox had to go through it. And JD is just the latest person to sit in the chair. Now, the absolute best scene in the episode has nothing to do with the medicine. After the simulation lab funding gets pulled, Elliot doesn't fight JD. She walks over and starts talking to Turk, and she says exactly what she's not been saying.
Yeah, JD does prioritize me, and I'm sorry if our friendship got in between you guys.
It's not even about the funding, Turk. I mean, how many times have you and I actually spoken since JD and I separated?
Elliot, we speak a lot.
DMing me Star Wars memes does not count. I get that people choose sides, but I just never thought that you would disappear.
Because what Elliot actually wants, and what she finally says out loud, is that their communication has fallen off, that she wants a relationship with Turk, not Turk as an extension of JD, not Turk who chose a side and went quiet, just colleague specifically. And Turk answered her. He admitted that he's struggling, that he just doesn't know how to be himself anymore. And when JD and Elliot separated, the entire social infrastructure collapsed. Now, Turk didn't choose a side, he just lost the go-between. And without JD in the middle translating, they don't have a shared language for anything that requires emotional weight. Now, obviously, this is avoidance, address this connection, but he does do something interesting. He says, look, I can do better, and I will be better. Now, the original show didn't give these two an independent relationship. They existed in each other's orbits, always adjacent, but never direct. I think the closest episode we ever got was when Turk had a fantasy about Elliot. Now, giving them their own thread with real friction to work through is the most mature thing that this revival has done so far. Throughout the entire episode, there's only one character who doesn't need anything from the institution. That was Samantha Tosh, the intern from the previous episode that was talking about the doctor who did the procedure. Well, it turns out that she's just not a social media consumer, she's a streamer.
Oh my
Girl, can you stop popping out of places like that girl from the ring?
I accept your apology, Bishana. Look, is what I do silly? Sometimes. Have guys offered to buy my socks after a 36-hour shift? All the time.
Ew.
Thankfully, I haven't had to go there, but the money I've made from brand partnerships has helped me pay off every single medical school loan.
You've got no loans?
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Told you. Sorry.
That is inspirational.
She creates sponsored content between rotations. She has the occasional offer to buy her socks after a 36-hour shift, which again, Dr. Cox pointed out that he wasn't allowed to do, but that she's declined while keeping open as a future option. That detail inverts every intern dynamic that the original show ran on. The hierarchy used to have financial gravity. JD was in a lot of debt when he started. He needed a job. He needed the recommendation from Dr. Cox. Sam does not feel any of that. When a colleague fans out over her in the break room, she doesn't perform any warmth. She just says, "I'm eating lunch," and she stares at them. So what the show's setting up is a potential problem where JD eventually has to manage her. He won't be able to use any of the tools that work on everyone else. He can't threaten her career. He can't make her feel small. He can only actually be worth listening to, which means that Sam is going to be, without meaning to, she's going to be the most direct test of whether JD can actually do this job. Not through his institutional leverage, but through something harder to reach. The ability to make someone want to be better just by being in the room. Now that is the long game. The episode's emotional thesis gets delivered at the nurse's station at the end of a very long hold. JD told an intern to fight the insurance company for Stanley's medication. He wanted this young intern, to have a win. And then he covered his patient load while he made the calls.
Dr. Dorian, I need a minute.
Bring us home, Sibby.
Not a big deal, but did you tell this little English Chalamet to do what it takes to help his patient with insurance?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, I lied about the not a big deal part. Can you tell him what you said?
Well, I lost my temper with the person on the phone. I'm sorry.
You did a bit more than lose your temper with the person on the phone. Chitty chitty bang bang.
What happened to no nicknames?
He screamed a curse word that they use over in London that no one in this nation would ever have the audacity to yell in a hospital. Except maybe in gynecology.
Then JD had to take over the call himself because the situation had escalated. Stanley, the patient, was rationing his pills because even with insurance, 90 of them cost $1,000. He takes 2 a week instead of 7 because it makes them last longer. That's his solution to not being able to afford the medication that is keeping his heart from killing him. Now, JD is able to get some samples. He makes some calls. He promises clinic hours and guest lectures to the other concierge doctors that he used to work with. You know, he does everything a person with access and goodwill and a new job can do. And then he sits on hold for 2 hours and 15 minutes. He waits to speak with someone at the insurance company who may or may not have a medical background, and his voiceover says,
At the end of the day, we do whatever it takes to help people.
Representative.
Maybe that's cynicism, maybe it's not, but it is medicine. The show earns that line by letting the hold music actually play. You feel the time passing, and then Turk shows up with cake from the welcome dinner that JD missed as chief of medicine. And the insurance hold is still going on. Not the robots, not the budget meetings, not the management philosophy. This. Sitting here, doing the most good you can in a single shift before going home. My first day is a good episode. It's not perfect. The false dilemma is convenient. The 18-hour shift is a missed note. I don't even want to get into the 36-hour shift. And while the premiere was more precisely engineered, the foundation that's been laid is solid. And I think JD is starting to understand what he actually signed up for. There are 7 episodes left. I'll see you next time.